shit, it's back.
Keep that thing away from the power lines!
No problem. Watch this. Hey, stupid! You want some of this? Come and get me! Get out of there! Go, 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 go!
As we shift slowly out of the summer months, it means a few things. Temperatures start to drop, weather gets worse, we all start spending more time indoors. Most importantly, big games start hitting our machines to entertain us during these longer, colder nights. Lots of games. Hi viewers, and welcome to my in-depth look at Microsoft's first big autumn launch from its own in-house studio, the Coalition. A little later than I planned, but a completed game allows a more thorough analysis, and that includes some meaty online play. Like last year, it is another remaster of a previous classic, and it's not like either side is shy at raiding the retro cupboard, is it? But this time an older and more poignant release, as we have a game that defined a generation when launched on the Xbox 360 back in 2006, with its gobsmacking visuals and big production budgets. Cliffy B and the team from Epic had a deal with the Big M to make an exclusive title for the machine, and up until last year, Epic still owned the franchise until Microsoft bought it off them for an undisclosed, but I am sure not too insignificant sum. It also saw the debut of the Unreal 3 engine, one that has seen many battles across platforms and companies during its long life as it tore up the generation. While other engines have been rewritten and other such dramatic statements, Unreal Engine 3 has evolved, with developers having access to the source code, like as per its younger iteration in version 4, allowing them to tailor, tweak and generally improve it as they go to best suit the developers' needs. This has seen some big changes to it over the years, with it never shipping with any PBR shaders or global illumination options for one, both and more that have been included since across other games. It received its swan song in the latest and final entry from Rocksteady Games in the Arkham Knight series. Here the team not only delivered a superb game, but also wrung the engine to within an inch of its life, and was a fitting and stunning end to both. Check out my detailed breakdown of the game and final verdict on all versions if you are so inclined. But it does not end here for the engine. The team not only wanted to remaster the game, but they also wanted to remake it. Polish it, so to speak. This meant that using the same engine was a given, or more the scripting side, which includes core functions like animation systems, AI, triggered set pieces and such like. The work needed to recreate the game in a new one would have been much bigger and far more expensive. Being devised by a much smaller team within the company, the majority are hard at work on Gears 4, and assisted by some outsourced work in asset creation, which is very common, has enabled the team to concentrate on areas and styling a far more modern game than before, which is a controversial choice whenever it is done, and no less so here. In fact, on the contrary, with such a stylised and generation-defining game, it may be even more divisive than normal. First, we hit the all-important metrics and performance targets. Now, the first rule of a remaster involves a simple equation. 1080 divided by 60 should return the magic number, and of course sales, but here the number has not been fully calculated. Although the multiplayer hits this solid metric with grace, the single player does not. Both run a fully native 1080 display, but the campaign runs this at a 30 FPS target rather than the multiplayer's 60, which is a shame for such a fast-paced shooter like this, but by no means a showstopper, as a solid 30 with a good object motion blur still feels and looks good. Sadly, that's missing from here, but it's still a very smooth presentation. Both game modes have received improvements in model and object geometry, textures and lighting, along with some more intrusive and technical improvements. It plays the same as it always has. You run, you gun, you rub against waist-high walls. It did not invent this combat-orientated cover system, contrary to popular belief, but it did popularise it. That honour goes to N64 release Winback. But many games have used it since and after. But here it worked brilliantly, and along with the roadie run was mapped to the same button for fast context action. That worked most of the time, including wall bounce technique used to great effect in multiplayer matches, but far more so in its sequels. The campaign is the exact same plot as before, with Marcus Phoenix freed from prison to help lead the cogs against the Locust hordes that felt compelled to stay true to their moniker of consumption and destruction, and are trying to eradicate all human life from the planet, while also destroying the place. Typical. And all this plays out just as you would expect and have probably played before, but it does have some changes, both visually and mechanically. The game is based on its original engine and structure for sure. Dom is still as useful as a chocolate fireguard and as robust as so in combat. Oh Dom, for the love of... Enemies are of an identical level of intelligence, following a more rigid two-mode action plan, hide or shoot, and again clearly demonstrates the same engine traits from the original. Animation is also handled with the same keyframe process from the first game, and although clear jumps within its sets are evident, even to this day it highlights how far ahead Gears was, with it still not looking that dated. The slide into position from cover is still commonly used now to activate key points from within animation, and always paves the way for multiplayer wall bouncing speedy action. But the cutscenes show probably the single biggest and drastic change from the original. Whereas the 360 release all ran real time bar some minor exceptions, this version fully adopts a pre-rendered approach, and although a great shame, and one that within the time constraints, budget and team size is an understandable decision. I do not doubt that with more of both of these they could have all been real time on the Xbox One. And the changes made are worthy of the remake stamp. Entire camera angles, poses, animation, which is motion capped in most of these, like the original game, can be night and day between the original. Some of this is due to the 360's quite popular shaky flash grunge style of the time, now adopting a more standard pan and center structure. If you compare this chopper sequence, you can see the original went for a first person observation style with no cuts and the conversation unfolding in one single shot, with the Ultimate Edition having a much tighter film editing with a far more grand landing sequence now added to show off its updated visual palette. These are all still in-engine, managed through the Unreal Engine Matinee scripter, so although the fade to black and fixed asset is still present, the jump to these is not too jarring, aside the obvious improvements in rig bone animation points and mocap, and overall they are a large improvement from the original.
You're Baird.
Yeah, that's right, asshole. Question is, who are you?
Oh shit, quiet. Don't move. What was that?
A berserker. She can hear us. She can smell us.
Level structure is also treated this same update and construct. From pillar, characters, vehicles and enemies have all seen a tangible increase in polygon budget of a reasonable but not groundbreaking level. Some of this may be due to the constraints on the team and original engine use, although they have implemented some areas from later engine releases. A physically based shader pass has been added, and although not a fully realised one, still adds to the biggest leap over the original. Although signs are evident of its adopting of a later game's construction and visual style. The lighting, and more importantly its presentation, is far less bleak, and more orange-yellow bright tone is a stark and, in my opinion, too large a change from the first game's core oppressive style and aim. It shares much with the third game, and again early PBR shading style and much more tropical colour tone. Even more you can see than last game, Judgment does show many model similarities with the new game, along with its colour tone being very similar. More so between these games than the original, but at times it can look stunning with great gothic style and ruins mixed with a far more natural lighting tone with heavy diffused materials, creating a far more convincing world that sadly loses much of its subdued, almost futile tone due to this. This is front and centre in the third act, where a dark and stormy night is the stage for your encounter, but what was once a standout level in the game, creating just the right level of foreboding dread, now looks almost like a light drizzle in a supermarket loading bay. Technically the new version is leagues ahead, now using far more light sources, accurate lighting model, far more varied and much higher quality textures, with GPU driven particle rain allowing individual drops to fall and be depth calculated within the Z buffer. But in overall presentation it fails to achieve its aim anywhere near as well as the original multi-alpha transparent textured rain, and shows that technology has to complement art style and design rather than be present for present's sake. But in every other aspect this level looks so much better than the original. It is a small trade-off. With rain like we have in Arkham Knight from the same engine shows ultimately it can be done within the engine. But this is the worst case of changes in my opinion from the original. Alpha fire effects are much better now, and explosions, smoke all look more impressive, and the changes to level design with things like railings added to areas or extra objects in battle, along with far more immersive lighting like the cathedral stained glass colour bleed now added. Although as all lighting is baked into the textures, it still looks good aside some point light placement issues. Elsewhere a camera based motion blur not far from the original, just much better sampled, is in play, along with bloom touches as we mentioned, and some alpha based effects and particles. So good in fact the locusts like to dance. Sadly, the per-object blur present in later games is missing here in gameplay, but it is present in the pre-rendered scenes, so the work within the engine shows it was present. Multiplayer takes most of its cues also from the third game, but the same models and maps as the first. Ranking has now changed from its original army rank to the third game's number system. Lobby and matchmaking are also identical from that game, but this is clear from the original multiplayer structure being very outdated now, although as you can see, still up and running. What has changed here though by the largest improvement is frame rate. Like single player, it also sports the near 2.5 times resolution improvement along with twice the frame rate, which adds a great deal to the online portion and was the right choice for the team to make. Side by side you can see big improvements to visuals along with its performance. The crisp IQ is very welcome and makes long sniper shots for head popping even easier, and that satisfying watermelon sound is delivered along with its dropping of other post effects, but it looks very similar to the single player game. The 360 release multiplayer was also 30 and overall ran slightly better than the single player game. Being an Unreal Engine game, it had to suffer from tearing, and it does, something the first game really suffers from, as they all do. But here on Xbox One we see 60 FPS pretty much locked no matter the action, alpha effects or particles bouncing, and tearing is kept to the top section or third and is very rare. Only around 20 drops of single frames are collected from over 10 minutes of tested multiplayer action. It is a rock solid performance and is a huge leap over the original in every way and never hampers your enjoyment or skill. In fact, aside this detailed analysis, you probably wouldn't even notice.
Shit, yeah!
Units are taking heavy fire.
Single player is not so solid though. Being a later analysis for me, it has allowed me to complete the game and test much later sections of the game, with the lowest recorded dip in single player as low as 22. Not quite as bad as the original game, but near. But this is rare, and many of the dips in the game, if not all, seem to come from loading and the CPU side over the visual GPU. Here, just throwing a grenade that will spark the immersion hold close animation and multiple physics-based deaths causes dips before and after, with no real GPU strain happening. Also here, just bouncing off a wall but in the background, you can hear the sound of AI fighting causing a longer stall of 80 milliseconds, again, nothing to do with the GPU. Much of this may stem from the use of the older engine, not as suited to modern hardware and API, along with it not being a very multi-threaded engine. So we may be seeing some more of a limit on the single player frame rate, more so due to the engine constraints than any actual hardware ones directly. It paints a good picture of how an engine designed for a spec can drastically outperform on both a visual and performance stance over an engine shoehorned to work within constraints. But nothing revolutionary in that statement here, more of a good example. This is not to say the game disappoints, and it does not. Even with the huge increase in resolution and styling, geometry etc, it still performs much better than the older game. Tearing still crops up and like the original can be all over the screen when it does, but these occurrences are far fewer and maintain the rate better when they do. But this is by no means an issue isolated to the game, as the engine has always had this issue across multiple games and platforms to even begin to mention. But with a long run of over 10 minutes across the game, including the heavier sections, still sees an average of near 29 FPS, with the older game hitting nearer 26, a decent but not rock solid performance. Even the welcome addition now of a new to console, as only previously playable on the old PC release, shows a solid performance while battling with the brew mark. Although the performance isn't rock solid, it never really deters from enjoying the game. Sound is another section that has been upgraded. Although original dialogue and voice recordings are still used, additional processing is performed on them. In cutscenes they now sound much clearer and more defined. Now drifting away from Dom enables voice to come through the radio rather than within earshot, no matter how far you were, as per the first game.
I hope that's not Rojas down there. This little boy just turned 2 last week. I hope that's not Rojas down there. This little boy just turned 2 last week.
Explosions are now far more explosive, and the sound delivered across more channels better appreciated with a decent sound system. In multiplayer, this allows you to pinpoint where an enemy is coming from, which is not only an audio benefit, but a gameplay one.
Nice move! I think we're good.
In the end, the game shows a huge shift and lesson learned, I feel, from last year's very ambitious and faulty Master Chief Collection, with the aim of 1080-60 not hit upon launch or across all games. A segmented development across studios delivered a commendable collection that had many failings until later patches fixed most of these. Here, Microsoft allowed it to be co-developed alongside Gears 4 and mostly within the same studio, delivering a very polished and beautifully presented game with no issues and a multiplayer that is solid, fast and above all else just as fun and enjoyable, if not more so, than the original. It has made some artistic changes that some may not appreciate, but its upgrades and clean IQ helped with a decent texture filtering used across the much better and high quality ones, and recreated here all help deliver a game that hides its last gen roots very well and better than most other remasters. Now if only Dom was not such a ball and chain. Oh, for the last time, Dom, shoot or run! As always, I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this. If so, then please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me immensely and I appreciate each and every one of you that does. Please leave your thoughts in the section below. I'd like to hear what you guys and girls think. Please stay tuned for much more to come. I'll leave Marcus to see you out, and it only leaves me to say, you guys and girls take care, and I'll see you very soon on the next one.